Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending tonight's event. My name is Philip Ashby. I'm with PBS Wisconsin, and I'll be your host and moderator this evening. Tonight's event will include a 45-minute presentation, a 15-minute Q&A, followed by closing remarks. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, please share those in the chat at any time. And as for the questions, we'll address those during the Q&A portion. I want to express a thank you to our partners who helped make this event possible, the John Michael Koa Arts Center and the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. One of the reasons PBS Wisconsin is a partner of this event is due to its dedication to enriching and connecting with audiences throughout the state via television, education, and community engagement, and partners such as this one tonight. We're excited to be continuing this endeavor by welcoming you to this evening's presentation. I'll start with some background on our esteemed guest, Michael Ford, known as the Hip Hop Architect. Michael is a Detroit-born architect, designer, and educator whose years of experience, professional practice, research, and publications and lectures fuses two passions: hip hop architecture, hip hop culture, and architecture. As exhibited in his TEDx talk, Hip Hop Architecture: The Post-Occupancy Evaluation of Modernism, Michael is dedicated to stimulating cross-disciplinary discourse between practitioners and residents on the impact architecture and urban planning has on culture. His hip-hop architecture research has been featured in a variety of media, including appearances on the Oprah Winfrey Network, The Today Show, the Hulu documentary titled Design for All. As for publications, his work has been in Rolling Stone Magazine, Fast Company Design, Vibe Magazine, and Interior Design Magazine, to name a few. Michael is known in the architecture community for his thought leadership and is a highly regarded speaker with keynotes at the American Institute of Architects National Conference on Architecture, the National Organization of Minority Architects National Conference, the Interior Design Show in Toronto, the South by Southwest in Austin, and numerous colleges and universities. In 2016, Michael created the Hip Hop Architecture Camp, an international program positioning hip hop architecture, hip hop culture as a catalyst to introduce underrepresented youth to architecture, design, and urban planning. To date, the program has served over 3,000 participants while also providing paid internships, academic scholarships, and international travel to complete hip-hop humanitarian projects. Currently, Michael has been working alongside some of the biggest names in hip-hop on the development of the Universal Hip Hop Museum in the Bronx. On a personal level, as an architect and designer myself, I really appreciate Michael's understanding and activism on the lack of representation in the architectural profession, but I also add how that influences design professions overall. Without further ado, it is a great joy and pleasure to introduce Michael Ford. Michael, it's all yours.
Phil, thanks for that introduction, and thanks to everyone who made this lecture possible. And thank you to everybody who took some time out this evening to join this discussion. I hope that you enjoy it, and I am looking forward to answering any questions that you might ask throughout the presentation. So feel free to use the chat option and place your questions there throughout the presentation. You don't have to wait until the end. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, here we go. Phil, we're looking good. We're seeing the presentation screen. All right, so thanks again. My name is Mike Ford. I'll be talking to you today about hip hop architecture. Feel free to continue to connect outside of this presentation, outside of the chat. I have my social media and my email here. So if you want to connect on Twitter, on Instagram, and you need to get your followers up, I'll definitely give you a follow back. Feel free to shoot me an email if you are not a social media user. So before I get into the presentation about hip hop architecture, I wanted to give you all a little bit of background about me. As Phil said in that intro, I grew up in the city of Detroit, but more specifically, in Highland Park. Highland Park is a city within the city of Detroit. It's bound by Detroit on all sides. It is the place where Henry Ford actually created the Model T and the assembly line. Detroit steals our thunder, but it was in the city of Highland Park. But this is uh, where I grew up. So above, it's one of those bay windows, the one on the left-hand side. It's where my parents lived when I was born, and it was above an activity center that ironically was owned by my church. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But what made this apartment special, it provided my introduction to music. Um, on Friday nights, there would be parties down below at the activity center. And from our apartment was a just back stairwell. And you can walk down those stairs, sit right next to the DJ booth, and peek out into the stage. And most of the time, people wouldn't even know that you were sitting there. So when there would be parties, say it's a wedding reception, anything that was happening, our spot was the spot to spend the night for all of our cousins. People wanted to come here, and we can always get a glimpse into what's happening down there uh, on the stage. And then we had our what we call kiddie disco nights, where young kids we could come together and listen to music, and a lot of times we just emulated what it is that we saw on the other night. So that's me in the brown outfit there. You can see some of the other young folks from the neighborhood, folks that went to my church. Um, and you can see at early age, I'm trying to break dance down there on the left. It's me and my cousin. We got the center of the circle. I have no idea if we were breakdancing good or bad, but we definitely were trying. But this was my early introduction to music. So not only did I grow up above a place that constantly had music Friday nights, Saturday nights, eventually I started to play the trumpet. Elementary school, I got introduced to the trumpet. My dad and his brother were guitar players. My dad played lead, and his brother played the bass. And we started a jazz band. So I started to learn how to read sheet music in school, but when I'm at home with my dad, my uncle, and some friends from the neighborhood, we were learning to play music by ear. We would listen to songs and rewind them. We're using a tape player, rewind it over and over again, and eventually learn the notes, and then go out and perform in different places. And this introduction to music was something as I got introduced to architecture, I didn't want to put down. I was in marching bands. Again, music was and still is a large part of my life. And when I got introduced to architecture, early on, I didn't see how I was going to bring this love of music into the profession. And when I was at the University of Detroit, which is where I received my master's degree in architecture, eventually I found a way. So after completing undergrad, I had to start writing, my graduate thesis, and it started with one statement, a thesis statement. And I spent the entire summer before grad school writing this thesis statement, which was going to be focused on livable skyscrapers. And what I mean by that is the idea that eventually there would be skyscrapers where people will spend their entire life. There will be no need to go out of this building at all. And that was my first idea for what I was going to do during graduate school. And throughout that summer, I wrote about it constantly. And I mean, before school even started, I got bored with the topic. And what started out as a dare became my new thesis topic. One of my friends, his name is Eric, we went to high school together, also went to University of Detroit together. He said, why don't you just make it about hip hop and architecture? Because we would always do our presentations at school. And well, whenever we did presentations at school, we would always embed music, secret messages to each other, lyrics that no one else heard, but we knew what the MCs were saying. And he said, why don't you just do a complete thesis about that? And the first day of school, I stood up, said, my name is Mike Ford, and my thesis topic is cultural innovation, hip hop inspired architecture and design. This was to the surprise of my thesis advisor and the dean of the School of Architecture at the time. But luckily it worked out, and I haven't put it down since. After completing that thesis, I worked at Hamilton Anderson Associates, a firm in the city of Detroit ran by Rainey Hamilton, one of the most prominent architects in the country, who's also African American. While there, I was able to work on Louis Armstrong Park renovation in New Orleans. So this was after Hurricane Katrina. Louis Armstrong Park commemorates New Orleans natives' contribution to jazz music. So people like Louis Armstrong, Mahalia Jackson, and others. I was also able to work on the Motown Museum expansion while at Hamilton Anderson. So Motown Museum, this was over 12, 13 years ago, decided that they wanted to create an expansion, and Rainey Hamilton was one of the architects they approached. Rainey knew my love of music, and he brought me on to assist him with the concept. This project is an amazing project that you all should check out now. Again, it's 12, 13 years later. Hamilton Anderson is still working on that project with a national firm. It's totally different from what it was when I was working on it, but it is an amazing project to see. Another project that I've been able to work on that mix Black music and architecture is the Universal Hip Hop Museum. I will show you a little bit of that project today. That is a project in the Bronx. And in all of these experiences, which combined Black music and architecture, I've distilled those experiences down into a curriculum and launched a program called the Hip Hop Architecture Camp, which I will share with you as well. The Hip Hop Architecture Camp was started here in Madison in 2016, and I created the camp as a new approach to not only diversifying the field of architecture, but empowering those who come into the profession. Currently, less than 2% of licensed architects in the United States are African American, and there have been decades worth of programs and millions of dollars spent on trying to increase that number, but somehow we're still at that dismal number of less than 2%. So I said maybe it's time for a new approach, and that is what the Hip Hop Architecture Camp is. To date, the Hip Hop Architecture Camp has benefited from a number of great media. Our young folks have been on like the Today Show. They've been featured in Rolling Stone magazine or Time magazine for kids, the Oprah Winfrey Network, and a number of other places that have featured our young folks in their approach to architecture. And one of the approaches that I take with media and talking about the Hip Hop Architecture Camp is if we only talk about the next generation or try to find the next generation of architects by talking to architecture publications only, we're going to miss that target audience. So I try to get in places where parents or young people themselves will see this discussion and see the Hip Hop Architecture Camp as an opportunity to get introduced to the field of architecture. When we talk about hip hop is a culture that is made up of 5 elements. It's the DJ, MC, it's breaking. Most people, think of breaking, but what's out there is b-boy or b-girl, and then graffiti. Those are the 4 foundational elements. And then the 5th element is knowledge, and more specifically, knowledge of self. And it is the understanding of all of these elements and hip hop culture as a universal culture. At the Hip Hop Architecture Camp, we look at all of the elements of hip hop, but we do take a deeper dive into the MC. But to give you an example of some of the things I've done in the past that look at other elements, this exploration is called the structural stability of breaking. I had to give it this fancy title, but basically it is saying that if we can understand the physics of breaking, we can start to create new products or new design approaches. If we can understand, the forces that are exerted on, different parts of the body, if we can understand the stances or the freezes that b-boys and b-girls have when they are breaking, can we take these freezes and turn them into new products? So these are some sketches by an artist. Her name is Florian Nicole, that explores that idea. And here are some of the renders of breakdance furniture. So can you again take those freezes and then start to create products that are based on breaking? All right. Is the furniture just as flexible as the breaker, right? Does it at one point become a chair, then it becomes a table? Um, and this was, again, an exploration into breaking, and there have been a number of other similar explorations into graffiti and DJing. But I definitely want to focus on some of the work at the Hip Hop Architecture Camp and the exploration of the MC. So that first day that I said I was going to change the title of my graduate thesis, my thesis advisor said, I know absolutely nothing about hip hop, but there is a quote that we can look at and hopefully go from there. And this was the quote that she shared with me. Music is liquid architecture, and architecture is frozen music. So I spent all of grad school trying to figure out how to take architecture or how to create architecture from music. How do you freeze music? What is frozen music? And if architecture is frozen music, it must not have frozen hip hop. What is it? A lot of questions that were asked. I think I finished grad school with more questions than answers, but 16 years later, I'm continuing those discussions now. During that time, I made this statement that says, hip hop reflects the built environment and serves as an unsolicited, uncensored critique of architecture, urban design, and planning policies. And I believe this to be true not only for hip hop, but black music in general. If you think about jazz, think about blues. I mean, it was called the blues, right? It is a reflection of the environment, what's going on with the artist who's creating the music. This eventually led to me doing a TEDx that is called Hip Hop as the Post Occupancy Evaluation of Modernism. Another fancy title, just hoping that the TEDx folks would respond back to my proposal. But basically saying that if you are able to listen to hip hop, and again, I say if you're able to listen, if you're able to really hear the words that are being said, not get caught up in the beat, not the rhythms, the dances, but look at the lyrics. A lot of songs throughout hip hop are critiquing the places and spaces where the artists live. And hip hop is approaching its 50th anniversary next year. So for 50 years, hip hop has been critiquing space and place. And unfortunately, we have spent time dancing to those stories of despair instead of saying, how do we create environments that might inspire different lyrics? So during the hip hop architecture camp, we have our young people, instead of listening to music, want to print lyrics off. And I've created a process that allows them to evaluate those lyrics mathematically. One thing that is very unique about hip hop culture, the way that people within hip hop approach various arts, is it's much more complex than what meets the eye. This young lady is going through and she's counting a number of things that they learned during the hip hop architecture camp, and they're creating a graph. We call it a bar graph. So every line in rap is called a bar. and our young people create these bar graphs. Now she's going through and reconstructing that music using Legos, where each Lego each Lego represents a unique structure, rhyme scheme, or something that's been extracted from that music, and it's represented in her bar graph. So she's literally creating frozen music. How do those bar graphs look? Over the years, we have continued to develop this process, but here's some examples of music where you can see the extraction of the rhythms, the patterns, things like double entendres, the rhyme schemes, etc., that have been extracted and frozen. Then our young people, most of them, they've never made a 3D model, but we teach them 3D modeling. So we partner with organizations like Autodesk to provide software to our young folks. They also provide funding to the Hip Hop Architecture Camp. And the young people use Autodesk products to start making 3D models. Um, so these rhyme schemes that you see, different colors represent different rhyme patterns, and each artist has their own density of rhymes. So when our young people start to make these models, they can compare a person like Lauryn Hill, which is represented here in this graphic. They can compare the city or the massing of a city from Lauryn Hill to that of a Cardi B or Jay-Z or Lupe Fiasco. And it's not a sonic experience, it's all a visual experience. So we can start talking about things that are related to planning or architecture, such as density. But for our young people, it's not density of structures or buildings. It's really how compacted, or again, the density of rhymes that this MC creates. The different heights or different volumes are based on the complexity of the MC's vocabulary. So if you have a rhyme with multiple syllables, the MCs are given much more credit and the resulting volume is higher. If the MC is creating some simple rhymes, the volumes are lower. If it's a word but it doesn't rhyme at all, that remains flat. And that is our universal way of comparing, one MC to the next. And again, our young people, um, they start to make these 3D models. And what's interesting about their approach to architecture or 3D modeling compared to architects when we're practicing is uh, you can go to any architecture firm or even as people work from home today, and you will see, headphones. Like people are wearing headphones, they're listening to music, and it is this background experience. We've taken that background experience and placed it in the forefront of our design exercises. So our young people are looking up words on their phone. They're listening to music because you can't just listen, or you can't only read lyrics. You also have to listen to the music and find other ways that MCs may have stretched words, pronounced them differently, and made words that visually don't rhyme, but they made them rhyme. So it is a very unique and fun process. This young lady here is laughing because she's starting to discover words that rhymed when she listened to the song versus simply reading the lyrics. Then at the next step with the Hip Hop Architecture Camp is learning about 3D printing. So our young people 3D print those models. Again, their first time 3D printing for architects and urban planners. This may look like a city, but for any young person that may have created it, they might argue you down and tell you, that's not a city. That's lyrics from Chance the Rapper. Today, here are some of those other models, some explorations by myself that looks at taking music and converting it into cities. And most recently, here models that I actually launched as a NFT series. So if you are looking at NFTs, it's definitely something of interest today. But I've taken music and created a series of NFTs called Architecture is Frozen Music. The very last thing that we do at the Hip Hop Architecture Camp is make music. Right? It wouldn't be a Hip Hop Architecture Camp if we didn't make music. And we sometimes create music as a response to things that are happening in the young people's neighborhoods or communities. Sometimes we give them prompts as to what do you want to see in your neighborhood. If you can design any building you want in your neighborhood, what would it be? Or we might respond to, again, things that are actually happening. This was a camp that we ran maybe in 2017 or 2018 in my hometown of Detroit. And we wanted to look at some of the historic black neighborhoods, in this case, Black Bottom, also known as Paradise Valley. So on the left, this is Hastings Street. It's a major thoroughfare through Black Bottom. And then the Highway Construction Act is passed. And just like many cities across the United States, these expressways were built, but somehow the most convenient route for the expressways was always through established black communities, places that had some of the first black banks, black hospitals, black businesses, again, thriving black hubs and cities decimated with the construction of expressways. So the state of Michigan and the city of Detroit is looking at righting this wrong by capping this expressway and recreating a major thoroughfare in the city of Detroit. So we got wind of it, talked with the city planning department and others, and created a hip hop architecture camp where we use music from Detroit MCs to reimagine what that thoroughfare would be, but also to bring up the discussion that any land that is recreated over the top of the expressway shouldn't be given to the developer with the highest bid or the most capital, but how does the state of Michigan find ways to redistribute that land to former business owners or residents who were bought out for pennies of the dollar in the name of eminent domain to build that expressway. So we brought in former residents or children of former residents. They talk with our young people, and our city, or the street that we recreated again, was based on music from Detroit artists. So that music, we have a rap battle. Our young people are they're in a cipher, and we select the top young folks. We take them to a recording studio. Their song is recorded, it's mixed and mastered, and then we take all of the young people out and we make a music video. We were talking to a young lady, asking her, where do you want to go film this music video in the city? And she said that she wanted to go to this exact bridge, and she wanted to film her rap on that bridge. I don't care what other people do, but I want my verse to be on that bridge. So we did our best. We do this in every single city that we go to. But we did our best to find that bridge. And you're going to see, I'm going to play a clip from that music video. But the first young lady is over the expressway. The second young lady is in downtown Detroit. But these are lyrics written by the young people, even a chorus which says Black Bottom. They got so hype on a bus, we had to start filming on the bus as we rode to our first stop.
Black bottom, 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 black bottom. Making a change. We gotta let the people know Detroit's coming. No one man show. Making a change. Black bottom's the key. We haven't forgot. Look and see. Building banks, schools, and hospitals too. Detroit's brand new. Y'all hating. Thank you.
Staying strong. Am I wrong? Penetrating my dream through the song. My intuition, not playing my sick position. Got nothing all in my system, just rapping like it's addicted. Born and raised in the 313. Counting money, getting paid like I'm a G. Use the spinning paper just to clear my head. In the future, I'm gonna be rich off the bread. great community.
Black bottom, 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 black bottom.
You should take notes, cause we the best. Don't stress, be bust and put it to the test. Now let's talk about Black Bottom for a sec. It had the rich soil, man, it really was the best. But now it's gone, it was taken away. Replaced with Lafayette Park, wish it was here to stay. But it's not, so let's talk about Hastings Street. Replaced with a freeway, we finna bring the heat. Let's go.
So when our young people are writing songs, like it is a very conscious effort to have these educational components within our music. So the last young lady, she's rapping, she's talking about Hastings Street, the expressway that replaced Hastings Street, as well as Lafayette Park, which was a development by a very famous architect. And then we also explore different writing types or writing skills. So the young lady before her, who's rapping with the tall building in the background, she mentions, in the future, I'm gonna be rich off the bread. And for most people, you think it's a young girl saying, she's gonna be rich when she grows up. But what she's saying is that, she developed a bakery on Hastings Street. That was part of the development that she created, and she wanted to own a bakery when she grew up. So she's saying, in the future, I'm gonna be rich off the bread. So our young people learn about how complexities can be added to music, and a lot of our songs, have these extra layers that are oftentimes missed. The next young man is a video from Chicago. It's a video from Chicago. One of the hilarious things about the Hip Hop Architecture Camp is when we are traveling around, we have a bus, we're rolling around the city, and we get off the bus, we have a camera crew, we have lights, and most people have no idea who it is that's being filmed. And they start taking pictures, they come up and talk to the young folks. When our young people tell them, hey, I'm studying architecture, it's hilarious to see the people's faces because they thought they just met like the next up and coming rapper. But this young man the next young man is at the Bean in Chicago.
We about to build the hood that we living in. Guns used for killing that place that we should be chilling in. Blood used for spilling that place that we should be finishing. But we're not. Created new in Chicago, so killing has to stop. We gotta make peace, make change, teamwork, no pain, no lane, no haters trying to change the game. We gotta grow, take it slow, let them know we're rebuilding Chicago, till the crime finna go.
So this young man, again, being at the Bean, and you can see all the people standing behind us right there in that reflection under his elbow. It was a hilarious experience to have people come up to you and find out that you're studying architecture, not filming a music video for some rap label. During the pandemic, we had to make a little bit of a shift and went 100% virtual. When we have a hip hop architecture camp, no matter where it is, we always bring a celebrity to talk with our young folks. And the reason why is I can talk till I'm blue in the face about architecture as a great profession to explore. But I know that my voice will be amplified if I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with hip hop artists who really have the pulse of the community, who can amplify my voice and reach even more young folks. So throughout the camp, we've had people, rappers like Lupe Fiasco. We've also had NBA stars like Damian Lillard of the Portland Trail Blazers, who also has a rap album, come to the Hip Hop Architecture Camp. In 2020, when we went virtual, we had Angela Yee from the Breakfast Club come and kick off the Hip Hop Architecture Camp, where she talked about her own development projects and some of the design processes that she's went through for some of the businesses that she's opened. And then our young people had to film their own music videos. So this young lady created, her design concept was for a community center that she called Art 606. So our rap battle was a little different. You had to film your own music video at home. And then once again, we picked those top videos that talked about their projects. I'm gonna let you listen to her rap.
We individuals suffering, always cynical, crying cause of the visuals visible out our windows. Creative minds that are treated like they admissible, building if it's permissible, and kids can't act like kids no more. I wanna make a place where folks like me don't have to face a limited reality and limits on the things they make. You wanna go and paint a mural, wanna do some break, dance in the sky, it ain't a limit where we all create. A net of safety for the youth that's always on the run. My PLC LGBT, we wanna see the sun. We got the gardens, yes, but listen cause the work ain't done. Come and produce, come on and sing, come on and have some fun. Escape from guns and violence, from the oppressive silence, from noise and plastic barriers that rip and still confine us. We are the artists and we make until they blind us. We are the architects, we build over our own horizons.
So this young lady, again, she designed her community center, and we don't ask our young people to present, here's my 3D model, here's my elevation, here's my floor plan. We allow our young people to use the voice that they have, the voice that has reverberated around the world. There's no community that you can go to in any city, any state, or any country, and they don't have hip hop. Young kids in Detroit, in the Bronx, in LA, they're constantly being told, don't talk like that, don't walk like that, don't dress like that. But when you turn on TV, you see major companies that are marketing their products, their brand. It's all based on how young people in those communities walk, talk, and dress. But the originators are constantly being told, don't do it, while others make millions acting like some of these originators. So with the Hip Hop Architecture Camp, we say bring that voice, bring that creativity, bring those rhythms, those patterns, those textures, bring it into architecture. And as we introduce our young Black and brown students to architecture, we're doing it in a way that sets them apart from their peers. And when you come to a Hip Hop Architecture Camp, don't expect to hear a typical architecture presentation. Ours get a little hype. The Hip Hop Architecture Camp is something that's not only for young people. The Hip Hop Architecture Camp has also ran programs for hip hop artists. I always say that hip hop architecture is not a discussion if it's all architects sitting at a table talking about how they can bring hip hop into architecture. It is something that has to be done as a community. So crazy story. I do that TEDx. I have lectures that are happening around the country, uploading videos to social media. I get a message from Lupe Fiasco. He says, "Hey, I'm studying modern architecture. I just watched your TEDx with another group of MCs, and we want to talk to you. Here's my number. Give me a call." I'm looking at my phone. I'm like, this has to be a prank call. And what makes it even more ironic is that I was in Chicago, which is where Lupe is from, the day that he sent me that message. So I reached out to him. We developed a relationship, had numerous conversations, and we eventually came to the point of needing to bring more people to these discussions that we're having. And so I created this event called the Design Cypher. For designers or architects out there, it's like a charrette, but we're not using that language, we're using our language. It's a cipher, right? We're going to come together, we're going to throw ideas, we're thinking on our feet. So we did this event in San Francisco. I invited the architects and designers. Lupe invited the MCs, and we spent about 3 or 4 days in a makerspace, but not just a regular makerspace. This was at Autodesk headquarters, so it's a makerspace on steroids. So the same curriculum that our young people walk through, I walked a group of some of the most creative MCs that exist ever. I walked them through that process. So we talked about how you can convert lyrics into architecture. We 3D printed. We also taught MCs. This is MC. His name is Daylight. Daylight is most known for, being a battle rapper. His vocabulary far exceeds the vocabulary of most MCs. And we taught them how to create 3D models of their verses. So they were writing verses on the spot, and we're creating 3D models on the spot. We're 3D printing those items. And then we started to do things like explore those cities in virtual or augmented reality. So we'll have MCs write, we'll create the structures, and then we'll have that MC walk through. And then you start to hear MC say, hey, I might need to write something more complex. Go back, rewrite, and then let's walk through that city again. And then the fun started after that. If that wasn't enough fun, we started to see how can we take words such as rap, R-A-P, and turn it into a W-R-A-P. So taking a rap and turning it into a rap. This was a ton of fun, but for the people who came in midway through this experience, it was very confusing what we were talking about. Is it a rap or is it a rap? But what we wanted to do was take a rap, take music, extract the patterns and the textures, turn it into textiles, and then wrap ourselves with a rap. So it started off as these hilarious games or jokes that we were playing. People made mats or carpets, turned to a lot of things during those sessions. And eventually, I created these raps. I created the raps. And these are things I would give away to our guests when they would come to a hip hop architecture camp. You give them a rap. Sometimes we would give them a 3D printed model of their music. And the first thing they would say is, what is this? And we would tell them that it's your music, it's your song. They'll look baffled. And then once you start rapping and you're pointing to each part of that model, or in this case, the rap, the jacket, their minds are blown that their music can be experienced as something besides a sonic experience. Also in 2020, as the hip hop architecture camp went virtual, it was impossible to not take note of everything that was happening around the country, the demands for justice, the uprisings that were happening. And for me, as an architect, I called on my peers, called on architects, urban designers to stand up and speak up and not be complacent with creating the backdrops of injustices. All of the films, the videos that you're seeing, like you can see architecture, plazas is happening in parks, public spaces that has been designed by someone, and that was never the intent of the spaces that we created. That was not the program that we planned for to happen in our spaces. And I challenged architects and designers to say, we are no longer content with creating the backdrops of this play that constantly happens. We're going to come from that background. Some people heard it, some people didn't. Eventually, this discussion hit home for me. A firm that I was working at, I made a statement that I wouldn't work for an architecture firm that has any involvement with jails, prisons, detention centers, or any work that is related to the criminal justice system. And I found out that the firm that I was working with was doing that type of work here in the state of Wisconsin. And I found out in the worst way. I was asked to work on a project, starting off by doing counting how many jail cells and holding cells for juveniles a facility had. I'm like, why are we counting these? What is this project? What's going on? And I wrote a resignation letter. I was picked up by the New York Times, picked up by local publications as well, such as the Cap Times. But what I wanted to do, I left the firm, and my hope was to work solely on diversifying our profession. why do architects build prisons and jails? Knowing that the policies that will be created will target Black and brown folks, so that that product, that jail or prison, could actually be filled with bodies. I told architects, you're sitting at the table and you're asking the wrong questions. Instead of asking about materials that the buildings will be built with, instead of asking about your construction schedules or budgets, why not ask, how the hell do Black people keep ending up in these fucking prisons? All right, we are more than bricks and mortar. All right, we are problem solvers, and sometimes our profession, um, sometimes people within the profession limit themselves to brick and mortar, and I wanted to push that. So I turned back to Lupe and said, hey, let's start a competition. I'm no longer at my office. We launched a competition that challenged people to combine hip hop and architecture as a form of design justice. Shout out to one of my boys, Brian Lee, fellow architect who's based in New Orleans, who's like the leader of the design justice movement. So Lupe and I, we did a Saturday afternoon Zoom session, and we had about 600 or so people join this Zoom session, which was the launch of this competition, where we challenged people to listen to what's been said already throughout the history of hip hop. Use those as design prompts to create new places, spaces, or things that can help with the cause for justice. So one of the winners, as a student at Georgia Tech, he took a verse from an artist, Joey Badass, where Joey was saying that we need more surveillance on the people who are surveilling, who are giving surveillance to our neighborhoods. And what this participant created was what he called the autonomous witness vehicle. This was, again, all based on these lyrics from Joey Badass, but this drone would be deployed whenever a police officer, pulled over a driver or stopped a pedestrian. The drone would be deployed. It would create a 3D scan of the entire scene. It will capture audio and video, and then this would be immediately released to the public in the public database, eliminating the need for officers to create police reports, because it will be created for them, and it will not be mixed with emotions such as I felt threatened, I feared for my life, the same narrative that led to the murder of Black and brown folks. So this was one of the winning submissions, and we had a number of submissions that were equally as great, from not only architects and designers, but students and people that were not architects. After that competition, I was asked by the city of Madison, if you recall, a lot of cities were starting to board up storefronts in response to some of the uprisings that were taking place, and a lot of the agitators who disguised themselves in the crowds of people who were calling for justice and who were solely out there to destroy property, and guide the media somewhere else instead of the talks about justice. So I was asked by the city of Madison to come and create a mural. I had about 2 hours to get a mural together. An artist was unable to, fulfill the mural that they wanted to create. So a friend reached out, said, "Hey, can you do a favor?" I said, "Yes, I can do it." I created this mural called 526 Missed Opportunities. So 526 missed opportunities represents the number of seconds that Officer Chauvin had his knee on George Floyd's neck. And again, this was 526 missed opportunities to stop this unnecessary death. I was joined by a fellow architect here in Madison, Rafiq Assad, and a young MC who performed at the space once we finished it. When I created this mural, It had a great response from the community, um, but because of some of the media coverage, people wanted to attach their narratives to the piece. So it was destroyed twice after it was completed. The first time, the city found someone who could fix it and restore it. The second time, the lady completely destroyed the piece and turned into a case of a stalker, trips to court, etc. But when doing some interviews about the piece being destroyed, a company, Herman Miller, seen me and seen my story and reached out with a simple question: how can we help? And I teamed with Herman Miller to create a approach that would bring interior designers and architects to the table to discuss some of the injustices. Again, with architecture being, less than 2% of architects being African American, a lot of architects find it very easy to say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to get involved. So Herman Miller, when they reached out and said, how can we help? I said, give me one of your prized possessions. It is the Eames chair. This is the most iconic piece of modern architecture, modern furniture created by Charles and Ray Eames. I said, I want to take that chair and bring this statement that Charles and Ray Eames made when they created the chair. I want to bring that to 2020. When they created the chair, they called it a special refuge from the strains of modern living. Very powerful statement to make back then when creating this chair. I said, how do Black people escape the strains of modern living, right? We're dying because, or we're being murdered while we sleep in our beds, as we go to a store, as we sell CDs. We're being murdered as we jog in our communities or our neighborhoods. What is our refuge from the strains of modern day living? And I wanted to create a mural on this chair. What I ended up doing was taking a chair, totally remixing it, going back to my roots from Highland Park in Detroit. I had an automotive company repaint the chair. Chair was painted black with these highlights of red. And then I wrote the names of victims of police brutality on the chair. Not just police brutality, but I say victims of racial violence throughout the United States history. Then I created this audio piece and this video that we shipped with the chair around to different celebrities, community organizers, people who had boots on the ground and was working to create that special refuge from the strains of modern day living in their own way in their cities. This became a interview series through Instagram, where again I interviewed these community organizers or celebrities about the work that they were doing after they had a chance to listen to this audio, which I'll play for you.
No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. We are Black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We shouldn't have to protest because y'all are treating us wrong. We do this because we need to and have rights. It's a shame that our fathers and mothers are killed and we can't even see them anymore.
That's right.
It's a shame that we have to go to that graveyard and bury them. We need our fathers and mothers to be by our side.
He used to carry me on his back all the time.
Was that fun?
Uh-huh. It was super fun.
What was fun about it?
It's like you be up the sky, like an airplane.
What would he say to you?
He loved me a lot.
Gianna heard the news of her father's death on television.
She said, how did he die? And I said, he couldn't breathe.
So the proceeds from this chair, again, it was a one piece. It wasn't a line of chairs. It's one piece that we created. We shipped it around the country, and then the proceeds from this chair went to a group of architects and designers who worked with victims of racial violence to remodel their homes. So these architects provided pro bono services to a victim of racial violence here in the state of Wisconsin, who is now wheelchair bound after their ordeal. Some of the stories that you just don't see after these names are no longer in the media, like their life is totally changed. And this was a group of architects and contractors who wanted to provide free services to help get some work done. So some of the proceeds help reduce the construction cost at that person's home. And one of the last things here is, we created new ads for the Eames Lounge Chair and Ottoman. One of those original ads on the left shows a dad and his son, again, resting in that refuge. But for my son and I, it's totally different. Our eyes are open. We're not resting, and I have to share as much information as I can with my son so that his name is not another name on that chair, but then also making sure that I'm around and I'm not another name that ends up in this chair. So we called it a chair that makes you take a stand. It's not a chair that you want to sit in. It's a chair that you want to see. It's a chair that makes you take a stand. Again, just playing on words and similar to hip hop, but to get out and make a move. And now that we are close to time, I'm going to fly through a last project, which is a Universal Hip Hop Museum. It's a project in the Bronx that I'm currently working on alongside some big names in hip hop like Curtis Blow, LL Cool J, Nas, and many others. This was the first site of the Universal Hip Hop Museum. It's the old Bronx County Courthouse. When I was contacted by Curtis Blow, who I actually met here in Wisconsin at the University of Wisconsin, which is how I got involved with the Hip Hop Museum. I met him. He's like, hey, why don't you come out? We need you to sit down with us and make a design. I said, no way. I'm not going to put that pressure on myself. I'm going to bring some other Black architects and designers with me. So I called on my friends from the National Organization of Minority Architects, and we went out and we held a design cipher where we were with legends in hip hop, people like Curtis Blow, who's pictured at the top, the Sugar Hill Gang, and many others. During this design cipher, we came up with concepts for converting the Bronx County Courthouse into a museum. I came back to Wisconsin and worked with students at Madison Area Technical College to create some of the exhibits, some of the ideas and concepts that were discussed by the artists themselves. Then we went back to the courthouse, teamed with Netflix, and did a special screening of The Get Down, a series that talks about the birth of hip hop. It's not a documentary, it's more of a drama. But we did a special screening of The Get Down in what was to be the future home of the Universal Hip Hop Museum. So people like ASAP Rocky, Jaden Smith, Grandmaster Flash, Grand Wizard Theodore, a lot of heavy names in hip hop were there at that screening. But without going into a great amount of detail, the Universal Hip Hop Museum did not have site control of this building. We had to find a new location, which we found. It's now part of a development called the Bronx Point, and it is now under construction. But this is some of the images from the exhibits at the Universal Hip Hop Museum, created by the exhibit designer Ralph Applebaum Associates. I created a 5-city community engagement strategy, going around the country asking people what should be in the museum. That information was given to Ralph Applebaum, and some of the first exhibits were created for the Universal Hip Hop Museum. And so being a licensed architect, working in the education field as well, I often find ways to do humanitarian projects where my students can have opportunities to work with me. and where hip hop architecture can be used not just to introduce people to architecture, but to actually solve some of the problems that you hear in the music. Like, let's go out and solve some of the issues. So, our first international program was in Kenya, just outside of Nairobi, where I teamed with the Samburu Girls Foundation, University of Wisconsin, Madison, Lupe Fiasco, and a company, Zero Mass Water, where we went to Dr. Kulea's organization and provided the young girls there. She rescues young girls from some traditional practices which have been outlawed, like female genital mutilation and other practices which are hard to police in some of the rural areas. So she rescues them, brings them to our campus, pays for their education, but a lot of their structures on their campus are self-built and they don't have plumbing, so they don't have access to water. So what we did was we created a camp for them to visualize or conceptualize their campus, but more importantly, team with Lupe Fiasco, Zero Mass Water, to bring water to their campus. So Zero Mass Water created these water panels, or they're called hydro panels, but it extracts water vapor from the air, condenses it, turns it into drinking water. Lupe Fiasco is a board member and one of the funders for Zero Mass, but they did this all at no cost to the Samburu Girls Foundation or the Hip Hop Architecture Camp. So it was an architect combining with a hip hop artist to solve a problem. Here are some of the taps that were added to the building afterwards. So hip hop architecture is not just an exploration into architecture. It is a way to solve some of the problems that we constantly hear about in our music. Our goal is to one day go back and construct a new kitchen. This is the current kitchen that they have at the Samburu Girls Foundation. So we want to make sure that water doesn't get recontaminated as they cook for over 200 girls in this outdoor kitchen. So that's one of our goals when we return. But I'm going to end my presentation there by saying that we service over 3,200 kids in 24 U.S. states and in over 3 countries, and we haven't charged a single penny to any of the young people who have participated in our program. If you want to know how to support, you can make a donation by going to hiphoparchitecture.com. You can sponsor a camp. If you are an architecture firm, you can host an intern. Or if you can't do any of those first 3, you can just share our content on social media. So thank you again, and here's my social media handles. But looking forward to answer some of the questions that you might have. But Phil, I will turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Michael. Really thanks for that really engaging presentation and talk. Very inspiring. Yeah, let's go ahead and go right into the questions. First question is from Alexa. Who created the code for the bar extraction?
Yeah, great question, Alexa. That's something that was co-created between myself, the young people, and the hip hop artists that participate in some of our programs. So it's a co-creation that constantly evolves as we do more camps and as more hip hop artists are exposed to our process.
Thanks, Alexa. Next question from Erica. What's the relationship between architecture and urban planning? And a follow-up question would be, architecture and landscape architecture don't exist in a vacuum. Can hip hop translate to urban planning as a whole?
Yeah, I think the TEDx that I gave, will give you an even more detailed answer than what I'll give you now. But the relationship between architecture and urban planning, urban planning, creates neighborhoods, communities, larger scale developments, and then architects come in and create the architecture that is within that urban scale plan. And can hip hop translate to urban planning? Yes, that's the examples that we give during the camp. And hip hop, I make an argument during that TEDx that hip hop was birthed or born from bad urban planning. It is a reaction to bad architecture, a reaction to bad urban planning. And I call out a lot of the architects who are constantly celebrated for their approaches to design. And I actually say maybe they were not the geniuses that we think they were, because they created some of the worst conditions for Black and brown people that necessitated the birth of hip hop culture. One thing that to add to that is some people, when they hear me talk about some of the architects and urban planners that laid this horrible foundation that necessitated the birth of hip hop, and I make a joke saying that they're the forefathers of hip hop. Some people took that and like, oh yes, he thinks that someone else created hip hop. No, this is a way to tangibly tie bad urban planning to architecture and urban design, and to not restrict to not blame people who live in public housing or in under-resourced areas. Don't blame them for the conditions of their neighborhoods and communities. There's an architect or urban planner somewhere who actually set and created those environments. And they did not question the policies that were going to be housed within the architecture that they created. So I'm bringing the sense of design justice, to those individuals that we constantly celebrate in architecture.
Thanks, Eric, for that question. Next one's from Brandon. How do you work and prepare others for how to work with and in an industry that's primarily dominated by white people, well-meaning white people who only talk about change and only surface level types of engagement?
Yeah, I think organizations out there like the National Organization of Minority Architects, I'm the president of our Wisconsin chapter. I think those organizations assist in challenging some of those statements that are oftentimes put out by firms that make them look like allies. But organizations like NOMA, organizations such as Design as Justice, the Hip Hop Architecture Camp, we challenge them to go beyond those statements. One of the big things for me is put your money where your mouth is, and then also, change your leadership. If you look at most architecture firms, you scroll through their leadership profiles, it will be hard to come by a face that's Black or brown, and they can easily change that. What does it take for you to give that person who's been working at your firm for 20, 30 years, give them a leadership role? Why haven't they received a leadership role? Those questions are being asked, in very tactful ways. Lots of reports being put out by American Institute of Architects about compensation discrepancies, testing discrepancies, right? Why is it such a low number of African American architects? Is it something in the testing process? Is it something academically that happens before you even take an exam? So it's not one thing that one person will do, but it's going to take all of those organizations coming together to help make architecture more palatable for Black and brown folks who are introduced to the profession.
Great. Thanks, Brandon, for that question. Aspen has a question. Have you been able to discuss Hip Hop Architects' mission to any policymakers? Awareness gets the ball rolling and puts pressure on the decision makers. The folks experiencing racial bias and over policing, etc., know it isn't right. Our policymakers need to make it right in our laws.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about the start of the Hip Hop Architecture Camp, when we started here in Madison, it was a collaboration with the City of Madison and Madison Public Library. And the first event that we did was looking at the city's comprehensive plan. So 25 years into the future, what are the things we need to do now so that the City of Madison becomes whatever it is that the residents want it to become 25 years from now. So the Hip Hop Architecture Camp was this community engagement strategy where the young people who the city was having a problem trying to get them to come out to some of those engagement sessions to talk about the future of the city, the Hip Hop Architecture Camp came in, and we used hip hop as that tool for the young people to communicate what they wanted in their cities, their neighborhoods. And it's actually picked up, if you look at the City of Madison comprehensive plan right now, you can see references from the hip hop architecture camp. So that's one example of how we actually partnered with and had conversations with policymakers through the hip hop architecture camp. And then myself, as a public speaker, I've had the opportunity to go out and speak with a number of organizations, politicians, etc., about why it's important to have diversity in architecture. Having that seat at the table to bring up some of these things that, again, 98% of our profession just might not be aware of.
Yeah. Another question from Carissa. When hip hop translates into frozen architecture, are there any high correlations between things like proven successful land use practices, like transit-oriented development that promote a higher quality of life? Is there anything that has come out of the input and output of that input and output?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that we're constantly reviewing. Like, what is the frozen music? What types of cities do they represent? When you freeze a song from one artist, can you actually compare that frozen structure to another city? Does it look like a New York? Does it look like Chicago? Does it have the density of some suburban areas? And that's more of a design exploration. But the thing that's more important is not just making the frozen music. The thing that we hold closest to our heart is the 50 years of critiques that have been that no one has responded to in hip hop. 50 years of artists talking about urban planning, policies, and architecture that has been detrimental to the lives of Black and brown folks. And we spent time dancing to it and not any time responding to it architecturally. So I don't care what the structure looks like. When young people go through that exercise, it's an exercise in an approach to making something physical. But what we're really responding to, again, are the messages in the music. We're not responding to what that physical piece is once you go through that exploration. Our big response is, again, to the 50 years backlog of complaints from residents and users of public spaces.
Next question is from Gail. Do you have NFTs yourself?
Yeah. So the NFTs I showed during the talk are definitely available. So if people are on platforms like OpenSea, that is a place where you can go. My name is the Hip Hop Architect, and you can see a series of frozen music diagrams that I have available as NFTs. It's actually an auction for them that ends at the end of February. So go check it out.
I'll definitely check that out myself, Michael. Tony Wonderful asks, how can we help amplify your much needed work? Great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. It's two things I want to point out. One is social media. Social media has been amazing in helping to amplify what I've done already for young folks. So like that story I told with Lupe Fiasco, discovering this TEDx because someone shared it on social media and he's seen it. So when I showed those 4 things you can do, sharing is definitely one that goes a long way. Sometimes people don't want to share because they say, I'm not giving any money, so I'm not going to share it and make it look like I'm supporting. No, sharing the music videos from the young folks, sharing this lecture or other events goes a long way in being able to help find funders to provide this service to young people. Because again, I do it for free. We don't charge the young folks, so we got to get people eyes on it to support. And then the other way is tagging hip hop artists. Hip hop artists who, when they make songs, when you hear them talking about their neighborhood, they talk about their city, they talk about their block, talk about their hood, All right, they're talking about architecture. They may not have thought about it that way, but they are definitely critiquing whoever it is that designed their neighborhoods and communities. So start to tag them with the hip hop architecture camp, and you never know what might happen. So I gave you two very, uh, you know, easy, well, I'll say easy ways that you can support the camp that doesn't cost you anything but a little bit of time on social media.
I love the tagging. That is like a really, really great way to be involved. Yep, that's a great idea. Another question from Jenna S. They ask, how are you translating the lyrical city exercise into real architectural design that you create, like the Hip Hop Museum? Is there a specific design language, shape language that you're utilizing?
Yeah, great question, Jenna. So, um, fortunately, I have a number of projects that's allowing me to use this process. The Hip Hop Museum being one. When a Universal Hip Hop Museum is open, I mean, one of our goals is that you'll be able to use this process on a much larger scale. All right, you see one of the exhibit images that we showed from Ralph Applebaum, but you'll be able to go into that museum, see the lyrics happen. You'll be able to see, um, the rhythms and the patterns, and be fully immersed um, in the city that's created by your favorite MC. And then there's other projects here locally in Madison, National Guardian Life Insurance, um, where I've taken that process that's primarily used for music, and I'm using it on their mission statement. They're renovating their office and the lobby. It's a double height lobby, creating it's like a 24-foot tall marble wall. It's about 15 feet wide, but it is their mission statement. But I use this same approach, but instead of using it for music, I use it for their statement, and it's creating a similar textile or patterns that you see with the music. But again, it's based on their mission statement. So they are literally putting their words in stone in their building.
Well, that sounds like a very cool installation here. This will be our last question for tonight. This is from Zach. It looks like a lot of the models created resemble a gridded structure. You guys explored the idea of breaking the oppressive nature of the grid. While the beat of a song may be the grid, each MC may bring a different flow that isn't gridded to the environment. That is confetti, scattering, etc.
Yeah, great question, and that's an amazing question to end on. Um, we have explored going outside of that grid, and you can look at the various flows that exist in hip hop. One of the more recent ones being the triplet flow. For people who are fans of Migos, right? They have a totally different cadence. You have people like Big Sean, got to bring up a Detroit artist who has the flow called the Super Duper flow, right? These are things that breaks all of the early conventions of writing music in hip hop, and architecturally, they resemble those artists. So that is something that we have explored, and it's something I explore a lot when I'm doing actual projects. But for young children who've never made 3D models, introducing architecture in a way that allows them to easily compare one artist to the next, that grid comes in handy. And as the process evolves, I'm with you. It's fuck the grid.
No grid. Totally great. Great. Thanks, Michael. And thanks for answering these really great questions. And again, thank you for sharing your time and your passion and your inspiration with us all for tonight. Really appreciate that.
Cool. Thank you, Phil. Thank you to everybody behind the scenes who helped make this happen. And thanks for everybody for spending your evening with us.
Yeah. Thanks again, Michael. Before we close, I'd like to introduce and invite Ann Bresky from the John Michael Kohler Art Center to share a few words. There you go, Ann.
Thank you. Wow. Oh my goodness. Wow. Thank you, Michael Ford. My goodness, what a great experience, and thank you for sharing. On behalf of the John Michael Kohler Arts Center, we so appreciate you and the work you're doing. We also want to extend our appreciation to PBS Wisconsin and the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design for your partnership and support to make this event happen tonight. And thank you to everybody for staying online tonight for this engagement. It was incredible. The mission of the Arts Center is to generate a creative exchange between artists and the public, just as we did tonight. And it's so invigorating. But one of the reasons we are really excited to be part of this particular dialogue is that it ties in with our new exhibition and programming theme happening in 2022 called Ways of Being, in which the Arts Center works with artists to offer alternative possibilities of being in the world, recontextualize our past, reorient our present, and project new viable futures, collectively asking, what if? And as we can see tonight, we can definitely get what if. We'll explore ways of being throughout 2022, and we hope that you all will come visit us at the Arts Center for the exhibitions and the programming, and also visit the recently opened Art Preserve, which is an experimental space designed to house the Arts Center's collection of over 35 artist-built environments. There's free admission, and for more information, including upcoming programming, please visit jmkac.org. Thank you so much, Philip.
Yep. Thank you, Anne. I really appreciate that share. I also like to introduce and invite Tracy Mikowski from the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design to share a few words also. Tracy?
Thank you so much, Philip. Good evening. My name is Tracy Milkowski. I'm the Vice President for Institutional Advancement at the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. The Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, also known as MIAD, is proud to be a co-sponsor of tonight's event. Thank you to PBS Wisconsin and John Michael Kohler Arts Center, as it has been an honor to work with you on this project. Michael Ford, thank you so much for your presentation, the humanitarian work that you do, and the work you do to expose our youth to design opportunities and careers they may have never dreamed of, such as becoming an architect. The Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design is a 4-year art and design college located in the historic Third Ward in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Our students major in communication design, product design, illustration, fine arts, and interior architecture and design. Nearly 2/3 of all MIAD students are currently studying design. MIAD has a new design internship program for high school students in our community. It is an amazing program that introduces high school students to art and design and the careers that are possible within this field. To learn more about this program and all of our programs at MIAD, please visit MIAD, miad.edu. Thank you again to everyone who made this event possible. Michael Ford, thank you so much for your presentation. And thank you all to all those who joined us tonight.
Great, thanks, Tracy, and thank you again for our partnerships for this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In closing, I want to thank all of you for attending tonight. I hope you were inspired as much as I was with Michael's work, and I hope that you guys can carry this inspiration to your own work, and as well as to your way into the world. So I wish you all a good night, and hope you all be well. Take care, everyone.